This episode of Engineering the Future is brought to you by National Bank, OSPI's official banking partner. National Bank's offer for engineers just got even better, now with exclusive access to virtual healthcare advisory and legal assistance services provided by its official partners. Find out more at nbc.ca/engineer.
This podcast is brought to you by OSPI, the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, the advocacy body for professional engineers and the engineering community in Ontario.
Welcome to Engineering the Future, a podcast presented by the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers. I am your host, Jerome James. Today, I'm joined by Marilyn Powers, the president and chair of the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers. Marilyn, let's get right into it. Can you start by telling us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Jerome. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. I'm going to give you a couple of sides. I'll give you personal side and a little bit of the typical resume that we will always start with. I identify as cisgendered heterosexual female by the pronouns she and her. I am a mom of two kids who are 19 and 21, so they're on the launching side. It's very exciting. I come from many people will be walking or driving while listening to this podcast. I come from a long line of Anglo-Saxon farmers, so I'm white. So there gives you a bit of a background as to where I've come from. I obviously I'm an engineer, a mechanical engineer, a biomechanical engineer, a biomedical engineer. And I can say those because I have done the studying in that. I've also studied or worked in German and in French, so been that awkward person who didn't really know the language when I was in some of the meetings. And it's really brought a lot to me as a person to have had all those experiences in Canada. I've worked as an engineer in Alberta and in Quebec and in Ontario, so been around a bit there. And now I lead a team of innovators at Mohawk College who design and use technology to design great learning experiences for students.
Excellent. It seems like you have a nice breadth of interests and knowledge and experience. Why focus that experience into volunteering for the OSPI Board of Directors? And more importantly, can you expand on your interests and maybe vision as why you wanted to be president and chair in the first place?
Yeah, so a lot of the reason that I ended up doing all of those things, going to Germany to study and to work in French within Quebec, comes a lot from my desire to really take part in anything that interests me. And so when I was first talking with somebody from OSPI, because when I moved back to Ontario, I didn't know what OSPI was. This would be about 2014, 2015. And I met a board member from OSPI, and I remember having this conversation about the profession and how there seems to be a lack of representation about, the profession at the PEO and how a lot of things are happening and there are great things in technology and yet engineers aren't talked about at all, and wanting to kind of understand where we were. And so I thought the best way to do that was to join OSPI, because she talked about that being the place where I could come. And that's really what I found when I got to OSPI is meeting a lot of fantastic people, making connections across industries where people have the same interests in, let's say, data or technology, transformation, those kinds of things, but are coming to it from all different kinds of industries. So making those connections. And then, I got very interested in what people were thinking and saying, and I decided that joining the board would be one of the best ways to really get that experience. And of course, this year has been fantastic as vice chair. You are chair of the board development and strategy planning, and this was our strategic planning year. So it felt like a good fit.
Mm-hmm. And what do you see as a strategic vision going forward for the year as holding the chair and outward-facing president of the organization?
Yeah. So what I really aspire OSPI to do is to continue the work in EDI that they've been doing, and especially in inclusion. And this is something I feel strongly about, is that we often talk about diversity and have for years talked about diversity as being getting diversity at the table, almost as if it's a numbers game. Like we need to have, diverse people. I mean, the research is there. We know we need to be diverse in order to have better outcomes, to bring all the perspectives to the table, figure out, how to work together. But once we get people to the table, we haven't talked much about how do we communicate with people that have very different interpretations of things we say. How do we actually work together in that respect? So bringing that to the presidency as a big strategic vision for OSPI is something I feel strongly about.
Oh, excellent. So let's pivot into the strategic plan that you mentioned. Yes, this was a year that every 3 years, OSPI renews its strategic plan. It was a really great opportunity for the board to get together and really brainstorm the strategic direction that we want to adhere to for the next 3 years. And it's kind of boiled down into these pillars that we've agreed on, and that we have a strategic goal in mind for each one of these pillars. I'm going to read them here right now. The pillars are engineers lead, engineers care, engineers grow, and engineers prosper. Can you tell us a little bit more about what these pillars actually mean as it relates to the new strategic plan?
Right. So these pillars are really the core values that, after much consultation with members and looking out at the market, that we've landed on our core values for the engineering community. Now, of course, some of you will recognize that at least 2 of those are the same as were in the last strategic plan. The last strategic plan had engineers lead and engineers care. We've added 2 more pillars. We've added engineers grow and engineers prosper. And we added engineers grow. We add pillars whenever, this is why you look at strategic plans every 3 years, is because the market and the dynamics of the world has changed, and no one can argue that that's true. This year we're heading, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're heading out of the pandemic, and we're heading into a new world where we will be able to meet face to face more often. We will be able to, but we've already learned that a lot of the hybrid things that we were doing and being able to reach people through telecommunications has been fantastic for engagement. People have been able to join because it doesn't matter where you are, you can join a lot of these activities. That's what's changing in our dynamic, but also our regulator, the Professional Engineers of Ontario, has also been pushing forward with their transformation, and they are now mandating continuing professional development, or CPD, starting in January 2023. So we've continued to work on the strategic plan to make sure we realize those new dynamics. So let's start with engineers grow, because that's the one that really applies for the continuing professional development. So as PEO brings that in, although we don't know the details of what maybe that's going to look like, we do know that engineers are going to have to log and prove that they have done something to continually improve their professional life. So their career, whether it's technical, I've heard it's mostly technical. Maybe they'll get some power skills in. We used to call those soft skills, but they're really not that soft. They're very powerful skills. So more and more engineers are going to be looking for help in reaching those targets that they need to make. And OSPI has built out the Ontario Engineering Academy, and they've done a lot of partnering with leading institutions, so educational institutions. They've partnered with associations, so some of these are technical associations, and some of them are learning and development organizations. And we've built out a platform that can manage the distribution of this education called Learning Management System. And people can now come to OSPI and take a look at everything that's offered specifically for engineers. So leadership for engineers, management for engineers, project management for engineers. We can really look at a lot of those. When it comes to emotional intelligence, we have that specifically for engineers. So
what I'm hearing, right. So what I'm hearing is we are essentially a hub collecting opportunities to grow from established partners and not reinventing the wheel. Is that right?
Exactly. So imagine that in the world before, if you were trying to find some continuing education, you would go on to your local university, maybe the one you attended, maybe the one that you live closer to now, and you would look for some courses. If you don't find what you're looking for, you go to another university or other institution, and you kind of look around. What OSPI is doing is putting that all in together. So you go to OSPI and you can find what you're looking for. And one of the great things is that this starts out to be part of your membership, so that you can really start exploring this without having to outlay a lot of money. So that also is going to be key as we start seeing how we're going to work with this continuing professional development.
We hope you're enjoying this episode so far. At OSPI, we're here for you, making sure government, media, and the public are listening to the voice of engineers. You can learn more at ospi.on.ca.
Excellent. What about Lead, Care, Prosper?
Yeah.
The
So
other pillars? Yeah.
Yeah, let's go on to Engineers Care. This is very much around the equity, diversity, and inclusion. So we'll continue the work we're doing there. We're going to move into beyond what I was just talking about, of diversity. Let's start looking at neurodiverse people and how are they getting included in engineering, and how are they presenting. So we're doing some work in that area. We also have the engineering conference, right? That started out as an EDI conference, is now an engineering conference that's coming up in November. So looking forward to that. And another area of that is that we want to make sure that we raise the level of awareness so that engineers, because engineers deeply care about how engineers are perceived. So working on how we create that awareness in the public about engineers. So that's Engineers Care. When we look at Engineers Lead, this is one of the core values of OSPI, advocacy. How do we give more of our members opportunities to lead in engineering, in getting technical expertise into policies affecting governments and their change, looking at the interconnectedness of many of the programs, and what is an engineer's contribution to those. So we've seen some great advocacy articles come out in the past year, and so that we will just continue and making sure that we give the opportunities to our members to have a chance to join task forces and write some of those papers for policy right here at OSPI. And then the last pillar that we haven't covered yet, Engineers Prosper. This is new and a new pillar. And really, when we went out and we talked to members, I can't remember any conversation that ever happened where engineers weren't concerned about our scope of practice, the things that matter to our own pocketbooks. Are we being paid enough, or as much as other professions? There's always been questions like that. So we've dedicated a whole pillar to making sure we're looking at that. We're also looking at our benefits, making sure that we're able to give the members benefits that actually affect their pocketbook.
Excellent, excellent. Um, how do you define success? Um, what would you say, looking back after a year on the job? You can sit back with your head held high and saying that I had a successful year as president and chair of OSPI.
Yeah. When I think about success, I think about getting feedback about I didn't feel included, so until I came to OSPI, being able to hear that kind of thing. Really, it's if I want to talk about numbers, I'd like to see members join. So more members come because of what OSPI is offering, because that is showing that we're actually giving value to our membership. So hearing, personal accounts will make me feel great, but also I think I'll notice it was successful if not every conversation ends up being about how how engineers are not regarded as highly as doctors or lawyers in the public. So if I could have more conversations that weren't about that, then that would make me feel like we had some success as well.
Excellent. Yes, it seems like every conversation when it comes to board work or conversations around OSPI and PEO is about membership growth. How do you think,
Yes.
is there a magical acorn to crack in that regard? Or what would you say is the main pillar that focuses squarely on growing membership? Do they work in concert with each other? Is one more important than the other? Talk to me about growing membership of OSPI.
Interesting. That it's there isn't one thing that's going to crack that acorn, that's for sure. It's a hard one because there is some interconnectedness. There's short term and long term. Short term, I think the pillar engineers grow is going to bring people there if they are the professional engineers. If they're not the professional engineers, then I think it's probably going to be more in the engineers prosper. They'll join for short-term reasons. Short-term, I get something out of this right away. I think our engineers lead is definitely our long-term play. So our effect on policy and our ability to advocate on behalf of the engineering profession will create value for all of us, but it takes longer to do that. That's not something that people are going to join short term and feel the difference of, unless they're one of the people who are an expert in something that the government's interested in at that moment. So if you're an expert in some area that affects climate change, then there might be a short-term play for you in that. And when it comes to engineers' care, especially around equity, diversity, and inclusion, I think that is where people are going to feel the difference. So they might not join because of it, but they might join because it looks open or something. So I'm postulating a lot. They're all hypotheses that I'm drawing upon some of the conversations I've had with people. I hope to have many, many more conversations over the coming year, especially as we get back to face-to-face events.
Excellent. I can't wait for that. I'm waiting to have more in-person events, side conversations, hospitality suites, the whole 9 yards. I had a question about the passing of institutional knowledge from one step to another, from one presidency to the next. You're just coming out of the vice chair role, stepping into president and chair. Next year, you're going to be past chair. What is your responsibility with passing on information that you've learned in the role to the next generation, the next team, supporting the next president? How does that do you think that the system is currently functioning for that transfer of knowledge, or are there ways to improve that?
So it definitely, there's a system there of, as vice chair, one, you are asked to lead like the board development and strategic planning committee. You're asked to be on some other committees for continuity. So there is that learning curve when you're on those committees or chairing those committees to learn some of the role of the chair of the board. And when it comes to president, because to me, I think they're two different roles, right? Chair of the board is all about facilitating discussion and making sure we're making good decisions, whereas president is much more of a, how do you say that? The figurehead. So the person that's out speaking with the members and with the public and advocating on behalf of the members. So almost two different. One is very outward facing and one is very much focused on, is the team that's leading the board, is the whole board working together well? So there's slightly two different jobs there. So passing the torch, of course, going from vice chair to chair, that is well structured because of the committee meetings and the committees that you're in and you're running. And the presidency, so Mark Frayne is our current president that's passing this over to me. And he started including me in December in many of his meetings so that I had a chance to observe what was going on. So it's really there. And Réjean, of course, has also informed me of many things, as have other past presidents I've talked to.
So it's a well-oiled machine, is what you're saying.
I wouldn't even call it a machine. It's all about personal relationships and developing those, and everybody wanting to make sure that everyone else is successful. So they're more than everybody has been more than willing to chat with me, give me advice, tell me what to watch out for, and spur me on. So and cheer me on. So it's been good getting to this part.
Excellent. Well, you're off the hot seat. That was my last question. I really appreciate you taking the time to come in to talk to me today about the year ahead, as it were. And it sounds like you're excited to take on the role and make the 2022-2023 year a successful one. Thank you again. And I hope that you have a great year.
Thank you, Jerome. It's been a pleasure chatting with you about this today. And I'm looking forward to meeting you more often in person, and then many, many more people in person as we come out of this pandemic and are able to connect again.
Marilyn Powers is a professional engineer and currently the Director of Academic Technology Integration and Innovation at Mohawk College. She holds a master's and PhD in mechanical engineering from the University of Calgary. And as of today, she is also OSPI's new president and chair. I am your host, Jerome James. Thanks for listening.
From all of us at OSPI, the Ontario Society of Professional Engineers, thanks for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode.